Well, hello everyone. Thank you so much for having me here tonight. Can you all hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, great. As they said, I've been in the turf grass industry for probably over 30 years now. And over the last 10 to 13 years, I've been working on developing California native grass species in sod form. So tonight I'm going to go over that process, how it developed, what these grasses are like, how you can care for them. A lot of people have a concept of putting in a no-mow turf, and then they get it in and it's like, okay, what do I do now? In the spring, it might start to throw seed heads and you think it's full of weeds. What's going on here? So we're going to talk about some of those seasonality changes and why they occur and what you can do when they do occur and how you can treat them, because I think that's where the education and the true knowledge is needing to be shored up and taught to folks like yourself. So if you have questions, I think we'll probably try and put those at the end. So I'm going to try and move a little quickly to allow time, because I know a lot of times when I'm doing my presentations, people come with thoughts and questions already. So I definitely want to honor your time tonight and finish on time, but I also want to allow time for questions. So here we go. This is actually the island that I do most of my work on out in the Delta in Stockton. It's McDonald Island. It's about 6,000 acres that farms originally asparagus, now still potatoes, corn, grapes, tomatoes, grain products, and turf, which is just a great rotation to have. Very diversified area out there on the Delta. Oops, there we go. We're using the wrong key. Come on. There we go. All right, my first few slides have a lot of text, but it's information that I really want to impart to you, and then we'll get to some photographs of actual installations that'll just get your mind flying as all the different options are presented. So this is my joyful journey focused on developing sustainable California landscape. Does everybody know what qualifies a plant as a California native? I'm thinking not, since some of you are not CNPS members. So native to California means that it was here before the European influence. So basically the 1840s or 50s, or correct me if I'm saying it different than what you folks would, but the European influence, even the East Coast influence into the West Coast, and plants and different grasses that were brought over from one coast to the other. The idea being that a true California native is adaptable to our microclimates that we have here, to our soil types, and therefore they're going to survive and thrive the best. So this is about producing grasses that are native to our climate and our conditions, more adaptable, and they're going to perform better. So plants use water way more efficiently than us humans. They know what they need, they know how to utilize it. And the scarcity of water right now doesn't mean that you need to divorce your lawn. There's a lot of people out there breaking up with their turf. They're just shutting the water down completely. You know, having a brown lawn now today is a kind of a badge of honor. But is that really what's best for the biology and the soil microorganisms? Is that really the best thing for your soil and your landscape? I don't think so. I think we're going to see this winter a lot of fallen trees because people turned off their lawn, and didn't really think about the rest of their landscape. Turf does provide a service, a green cover over an area, and specifically grasses put oxygen back into our atmosphere. They trap and they filter toxins and recharge and clean our groundwater as it re-enters our waterways. They also prevent erosion and sedimentation runoff. And then they also cool our environment. So, turf is a natural air conditioner. If you walk onto an area of turf from asphalt on a 100-degree day, it's just an automatic 15-degree change in the temperature. So they have a place in our landscape. To the magnitude that they've been over the long haul of all these years, more likely not, but they do provide a benefit. So Native grasses especially provide food, habitat for birds and small mammals, with abundant insects and spiders and worms that those habitat rely on to survive. So invasive plants that would come in their place if those areas become open are what would actually be a detriment to trying to get native grasses established. So research is important, and I've really spent a lot of time with third parties just qualifying the data that I provide to you tonight. It's important to work with universities and other people in the green industry to just back up what you're saying. I don't want to just come to you and say this is what I believe, but it's important to have those relationships in place to make sure that what you're hearing is valid and true. So I pride myself on working with Caltrans throughout the entire state, UC Riverside, the Riverside Corona Resource Conservation District. The Portola Valley Town Center is a LEEDs Platinum building. They've got tons of awards when they did the new town center. They have a demonstration area that has 5 of the native sod products there for you to see. I worked with Cal Poly, San Luis Obispo, both the crop science department and the horticulture side, and then UC Davis Cooperative Extension. I've investigated and looked at subsurface irrigation, which is a big part of the new ordinance with the state of California on water conservation. You can ask me about that later. You know, when things are underground and you can't really see what's going on, I'm just a strong proponent of having a source of above ground water as well. I think a lot of systems can get designed around subsurface and they forget to give you a hose bib to hook onto if something goes astray. So having some form of water to be able to do supplemental watering, to be able to fill the gap is important, so don't forget that. And then if you're establishing plants and everything's below the ground and the water doesn't wick up to the surface, that can be problematic as well. So having temporary above ground irrigation when you're establishing plants and grasses is really important. So something to think about if you're converting to Netafim, or there's a bunch of different subsurface products out there. And then the data that I've compiled, as I said, is on not just drought tolerance, but adaptability, wear tolerance. Are these native grasses going to take wear and tear? Are they our next football stadium? Levi, they probably look like Levi. That was not my product. They'd be torn up in 2 minutes, you know, they wouldn't survive. They're not super wear tolerant, okay, because they're found up in meadows and the mountains and, you know, native type or natural type settings. So they're not plant bred and improved like our conventional turf grasses to withstand a lot of abuse and traffic. So, but we're looking, you know, always looking to see if one's more traffic tolerant than another for families with kids and large dogs and so forth. Sediment and erosion control I've looked at, and then of course subsurface. And so this is just a picture of what I do when I'm looking at different species as far as my R&D area. I usually look at new options, new grasses, and then I play around with combining different grasses together so that we can build hopefully a community of grasses that aren't going to outcompete each other. You might have one species in there that does well under wet conditions. So you have a slope that comes to a thumb and then pools at the bottom. You need a variety in there that's going to withstand wet feet all the time and maybe a little more submersion, while the one on the slope is going to dry out. So by building a community of grasses together, taking one variety that does well in a drier setting and one that will do well in a wetter setting, one dies out, the other takes over, and you have a community of grasses working together. Same thing applies with conventional turf. You have shade varieties that do well in the shade, others that perform best in the full sun. Mix them together, you have a sun and shade blend. Same concept. So the picture on the lower right is the sedimentation study I did with Cal Poly Slow, just showing how much grass prevents erosion as well as filters water as it re-enters the waterways. There's a trap at the base of that. It was in for a month, got a 2-inch water or rain event, and in the basin where there was a blank and no grass, there was 4 inches of soil that eroded just in that one storm. in the areas that were sodded for only 30 days, barely rooted in, no measurable sediment. So it's really wonderful what, green grasses can do to help prevent runoff. How do I know drought tolerance? I talked about the third-party data and how I determine whether a plant is truly going to provide that 50 to 70% water savings. In the past, ratings have been done visually, just walking across those 50 square foot blocks you saw in the previous photo and saying, okay, this one's a 3, this one's a 4, this one really looks good, it's a 5. All very subjective and in the eye of the beholder, so to speak. The light box technology is something I took on probably 15 years ago to analyze conventional turf, and I've used it now in the native realm to determine the drought tolerance of the plants. Because as a plant is under drought stress, the first thing it does is lose its turgidity, not a word I can say easy, but it wilts, all right? It starts to go out on you and wilt. It goes really kind of blue-gray. If you look across a lawn and you're looking for that blue-gray, that's where the drought stress is starting, and it can go brown, on you within a couple days if it's not holding the water. So this light box technology has a light source in it and a power pack on it. I look like I'm selling ice cream when I'm walking around outside there, on the ranch. But it actually has an aperture in the top for a digital camera. You take pictures of the grass, it pixelates the picture and pulls out the color, and it gives me a rating. So it's a very great technology for me to have. These are just a couple of really good quotes that I've come across from people in the industry that I value their opinion, and I thought you might enjoy hearing. The first one is from Ken Coverdale, who owned Blue Sky Native Nursery over in Half Moon Bay. He's a wonderful landscape architect as well. He says people are under the impression that sod forms are installed because of their water conserving characteristics. However, more importantly, they're saving the planet's atmosphere. Small motors on lawnmowers often produce the same emissions in 1 hour of operation that moderately fueled efficient automobiles emit as they drive over 350 miles. Isn't that incredible? Edgers and blowers are even worse, creating the same emissions in 1 hour that the car would traveling 1,000 miles. The carbon fact is that much more, that these grasses are much more significant for our environment and what they do. And then the second one is the owner and CEO of Delta Bluegrass. He says that lawns and landscapes are living spaces. They provide aesthetics, a place to enjoy the outdoors and recreational areas that have an impact on human health and the environment. And I really like what Eddie says when he says you need to put on a new pair of glasses when you're looking at the California native sod. It's not the traditional lawn of our childhood. We're entering a new era where the complex beauty of native grasses needs to be appreciated. I don't know about you, but when I was a kid and I come home from school and say I want to go play with Susie, if my mom had never heard of Susie, I would just say, well, her house is the third one on the right. And if it was the house with the beautiful lawn and all the pretty landscape and well kept, well, sure, go right over. I've never met her parents, but I'm sure they're great people. If I pointed to the house that had a big meadow with seed heads on it, she'd say, I need to meet their parents before you go over there, right? So, it's very much tied to our society and to us as people. It's a reflection of who we are a lot of times. So, I think that's a beautiful landscape over in Berkeley, where they've taken the native bentgrass and just let it grow naturally. They don't walk on the area, because if it did, it'd be walking through 3 feet of snow, it's fully mature, but it just has no boundaries. They've just allowed it to grow in the area. So we're going to talk about different blends that I've put together through trial and error, and again, trying to just evolve into a blend that provides a benefit and is going to be overall a long-lived meadow. You guys don't want to spend money, time, and energy to establish native grasses only to have them go out on you in a year, right? And that's a fear out there. So there's some that are geared more toward urban landscaping and others that are geared toward what I call environmental applications. So bioswales, stormwater channels, and so forth. So as a lawn alternative, the best option that I've found in my experience is a monostand, which is a single variety, because I'm a big mix it up girl. Let's mix them together and give you that community. But a monostand, which is a single variety of Agrostis pallens, which is a native bent grass. So are any of you golfers here? Anybody? No? Bent grass is what they have on the greens. They mow it super tight, 6 out of 7 days a week to make a beautiful putting surface. It's rhizomatous below ground, and stoloniferous. So stolen's above ground, so it's a creeping grass that grows and makes a really beautiful mat. And so Agrostis pallens is great as a lawn alternative. If someone wants to be more environmentally minded, use a native grass, but they don't necessarily want the long meadow aesthetic, this would be one that you would mow consistently on a regular basis, weekly, in the summer when it slows down, in the winter when it slows down, maybe every 10 to 14 days. It, as I said, it creates this nice sod mat. I have a sample of it up here, and you can take a look at it and see all the roots and how it does. And the photograph is actually Balboa Park down in San Diego. And they are developing a canyon there, and that's where their Cherry Blossom Festival is held every year. So it gets beat up to high heaven, and then it recovers rather quickly because of all that lateral growth that is provided by the creeping grass. I mentioned earlier seasonality, and so if you buy into this idea of the native, natural meadow type aesthetic, and you don't mow it, the natural progression of any plant that's not mowed or cut is that it's going to try and reproduce itself in the spring, usually with these grasses. So it's going to produce a seed head. And so that's when the phones blow up, usually because people are like, there's weeds, what's going on, something's invading my lawn. Well, it's just the natural progression. So if you look on the right-hand side, you can't even see the grass through all the seed heads. They're just super prolific with the bent grass. So, you know, you don't see the picture as well on the left, but that's the Sunset Boulevard in San Francisco near Sloat. The seed heads, if you don't like them, you just go through and weed eat them off or string trim them off, and then either rake them off or let them just grass cycle naturally back in. You do it maybe twice a year when the seed heads come. The first one will take them off, and then you wait a month and hit it again with the weed eater. And then less seed heads will come as time goes by. Another real popular combination of grasses is through the mixture of fine fescues. That's kind of the original no-mow that was developed out in the world. I don't want to say it was me, but it was me. I developed it as a far rough mix for the golf industry back in the late 80s, early 90s. The far rough is kind of the area on the golf course that gets oversprayed, maybe not direct irrigation, and where all the golf balls are lost and a lot of cussing goes on because you can't find your ball. But anyway, it's long. The grasses, the fine fescue family of grasses are really fine bladed. So because of that, they'll fall over on themselves and look quite natural. If any of you have turf type tall fescue, the conventional turf that's out there, kind of coarse bladed, it's in the parks. If you let that go and let it grow and don't mow it, it's going to get 3 feet tall, wide bladed, big, huge clump at the base. These grasses are fine, hairy, fine texture, so they give that beautiful European lynx meadow kind of aesthetic. So they're very beautiful and very adaptable and very diverse in the way you can treat them. You can mow garden pathways out. I'll show you some pictures in a little while. But the other benefit of them is they provide excellent shade tolerance. So I always say the fine fescues are your last stand against shade. So if you have areas that turf just isn't surviving, the last grass to try is the mow-free blends. And don't get caught up on the name. Just because it's mow-free doesn't mean you have to leave it non-mowed. You can mow it. It's just if you don't mow it, because of that fine texture, it falls over and gives that meadow effect. But if you go up into Oregon where they breed traditional grasses and you look at the shade studies, the trees are like this far away from each other. You can touch them, and that's what they're trying to grow grasses in. They're always just looking at fine fescues. Creeping red fescue, Festuca rubra, if people have heard of that. Never planted by itself, no bueno, not good. It is very, very strong creeper. And what happens in 2 or 3 years, it just becomes a thatched up mess, and you get a lot of disease pressure, a lot of problems with water penetration, and it just becomes too dense. So you want to, again, build that community of grasses by introducing some hard fescue, ovina types, which are sheep fescues, bunch types, that forces that grass to creep and fill in around it. That creeper becomes a good thing, but it doesn't become a thatched up mess, and you're not having to go through and renovate 2 years after you put it in. Last thing you want to do is have to go out and take a lawn that's a good 12, 14 inches tall and have to run your mower through it to freshen it up because it's become too thatchy. It should be able to be in for 5 years before you have to renovate it all, maybe even longer. I've stuff in Portola Valley that's been in for probably 7 years, and it's doing fine. So having some bunch types. So when we take it to the native side of the realm, you're looking at Festuca rubra, which is red fescue, Festuca idahoensis, which is Idaho fescue, and then we have an occidentalis, which is Mokolumne fescue. So 2 bunch types and a creeper give you that kind of ebb and flow, that really cool structure that it'll grow into. Super great on slopes, where in the golf industry, again, where I do some work, obviously, they have areas that are dangerous to mow. Really, amphitheaters, outdoor settings where they've had conventional turf and mowed it, just leave it. This stuff says, I'm cool, just leave me alone. Not a slogan they want me to use at work, but I like it. So this on the left side is Alta Plaza, again in San Francisco. Kind of a Aztec style terraced park, and this real severe slopes that have always been mowed. A lot of people, they're walking dogs like professional dog walkers during the day. All the little dogs are just jumping through there, getting lost, and it's just really, they love it. The dogs and animals, they love it. The kids are rolling down the hill. Everyone has a good time. The first time it threw seed heads, the phones blew up. We had to do a press release like, no, people, really, it's okay. But then we went through and we whacked it all out, and everything kind of settled down. But you can see the seed heads, they come and they're green at first, and then they senesce, they go brown. And it's not that they're going to reseed themselves. Some people think, oh, I'll just leave it and it'll regenerate itself. Perennial plants, their seeds aren't super viable. So they need to be almost in I've talked to the breeders about it, they have to be in a proper pollination type of setting where they're getting everything they need to produce viable seed. So you're not going to see it kind of regenerate. But the other benefit is it's not blowing into your neighbor's yard. It's not germinating in your flower beds. It's not spreading on your property where you don't want it. So you can weed eat it off while it's green, or you can let it go brown, and once it turns brown, if you don't care for it, then weed eat it off and just kind of break up the clumps and let them grass cycle back in. So grasslands is another one. This one's more of a European type of look. Facebook over in Menlo Park just did their new green roof with over half an acre of this grass, and it's just throughout the campus with a lot of beautiful plants and area for people to go and congregate and sit on and have lunch and enjoy the green space. So it has slender hair grass, which is just champsia. So it's a real tufty, light green plant. So just to give you some variation in color, everything in our lawn doesn't have to be dark green and perfect looking all the time. So if you like a little variation, this is another option. Just showing again the seasonality of it. Preservation is a blend that is more environmental, I would say, in its application. This is a hillside between 2 synthetic fields at Skyline College over in San Bruno. It has stipa pulchra in it, which, does anyone know what that is? Purple needlegrass? What is it? It's our state grass. Yay! Everyone knows California poppy is our state flower, but few people know what our state grass is. And so that's Stipa pulchra. Used to be Nacella pulchra. When I started 20 years ago, it was Stipa, so I always say, it's Stipa, no, it's Nacella, no, it's Stipa. So you can't make up their mind. They, some new person came in and had to make a name for themselves. They're like, no, it's a Stipa, not a Nacella. Anyway, this blend, the needle grasses are really beautiful, but they are true to their name, where their flower, when it blows in the wind, is really pretty and open and has these little hairs on it. It's really beautiful, but you walk past it and those little needles jump right in your pocket. So really not urban landscape setting for me. If there's dogs or if it's in a park, I would put it in the outlining areas. But the Nacellas or the Stipas are some of the longest lived grasses that you're gonna find. They can find stands of it that have been there for 200 plus years, maybe longer. So they're definitely the soldiers that are gonna be there the longest. Again, just kind of showing you a meadow when it's kind of firing off in the hot summer and in a non-irrigated setting on the left-hand side there. I was sharing with Sherry and Steve, one of the benefits I often forget to put in here about native plants is because they are more adaptable to our climates and our conditions in California. They oftentimes are the grasses that under non-irrigated settings go brown the latest and green up the earliest when we cool off. So they're the grasses that respond the best to our conditions. So that's part of the drought tolerance, right? Is if they can hold color longer than everything else around them, they're obviously better adapted to our environment and our climate. This is kind of the project that got me started back in 2003, a project with Caltrans on an overpass. There was one over in San Jose here at 101, I want to say, where they sodded a interchange, and there was a lot of uproar in the Mercury News about why are they using our tax dollars to put in sod and all of that. If you guys knew how much money Caltrans spends on hydroseeding through the hose, the native grasses, onto hillsides, to get maybe 20% of those native grasses to succeed, it would blow your mind. Ideally they want 70% vegetative cover. That cover is usually all those invasive annual plants that are coming up and getting a jump start on the native species that are the desired plants to be there. They're far more fire retardant, which is a key reason why you have vegetative grass along roadways, right, and so forth. And this is biofiltration. So let me go back just real quick, and I'll go quick because this probably isn't why you're here as much. But for riparian areas or restoration areas, big open areas where you might see barleys and other grains and plants for stormwater channels and bioswales, the hordeum or the barley plants are really cool. I've got a meadow barley with a California native barley, so I've got a wetland and a dryland species. So just like I talked about, one on the slope, one in the lower area of your channel that will take wet feet. But when the meadow barley was introduced to the blend, I had no idea, but the first cold snap we had, the first hard frost on the ranch that we had, everything turned like burgundy. On the back of the blade, it turned purple. It was just beautiful. So again, it's kind of that seasonality thing that I really enjoy, that you wouldn't think grasses would give you color that's not green, so just interesting little fact about that. And then when they actually produce their seed head, it's kind of fun to see those big beefy barley heads blowing in the wind, just to give visual interest even in a landscape if you have a certain amount of land. And you can let it go dormant in the summer without water and let it come back on its own. But it's just a really cool mixture of grasses that have kind of evolved. I alluded a little bit to the sod versus seed thing. California native grasses are produced by really 3 seed producers in California. 2 of them are S&S Seeds in Los Alamos, which is near Carpinteria, Santa Barbara area. The other is Hedgerow Farms, up in Dixon area near Davis. They are the two purveyors of California native grasses. There's little hand collections done by various nurseries and other folks out there that do collections. Pacific Coast Seed in Livermore is a native seed provider, but they're all now owned by S&S Seed. So there's not a lot of pressure to provide seed that has that's pure, okay? And that's something that speaks strongly to me, and maybe I can explain a little bit about it as far as, I don't know how interested you are, but when you buy seed, you think, oh, it's just the seed in the bag. I'm buying red fescue, Festuca rubra. Well, if you look at an analysis tag, it'll state the purity, and then it has something that's called other crop, inert, and weed seed. And so purity is just what it says. It's the pure amount of seed that's in there, and hopefully it's, with conventional turf, for me, it's always 98.00. Other crop is other grasses. So other grasses can be crabgrass, it could be orchard grass, it could be annual ryegrass, which is not a good one. And then inert matter is non-germinating chaff and twigs and soil. And then weed seed is just like it sounds like, it's weed seed. And weed seed can be something easy like, well, there's not a lot of easy ones, but unless you want to use chemicals, which a lot of people don't want to use chemicals, but there's some that are acceptable. They don't like being mowed, they'll mow out. But other ones that are problematic, like purslane, that can get pretty aggressive, or rabbit's foot grass, which isn't good. That's more of an other crop. But anyway, so it's important to understand, it's almost like reading a label with a list of ingredients, that if you're trying to get seed, you want to make sure it's as pure as possible. Because if you buy festuca, well, let's say the hordeums one for sure, that if I buy it, it might have other hordeum seed in it that's an annual hordeum coming with my perennial, and trying to clean that out of the other one is very difficult to do. I'm going to take a quick drink of water here. Get warm. Anyway, you know, and then also you want to look at the germination percentage. A lot of native grasses don't have a high germ. Conventional turf, tall fescue is always like 90 to 95%. Bluegrass is 80 to 85%. You can find some native species with a 30% germination. So if your purity's low and your germ's low, you're not going to get a good result. Oftentimes you're paying native bent grass is $90 a pound. I said hand picked by peasants in the Himalayas or something because it's expensive. But it's hard to grow. Only really one grower, so they kind of set the price. And so, you know, you just want to be mindful of that and try and cherry pick through to get the cleanest seed possible. Another reason why, again, a sod product might be, if it's in your budget, a little better way to go, because you're getting the desired species already established without that competition. Sod is an instant weed suppressor. Laying over the soil, it'll, you know, suppress the weeds for you. And it's a strong root system, you know, that's coming already healthy and ready to go. So maintenance practices, these are just some of the highlights of once you have a native lawn in, what you need to do to make sure it stays as healthy and strong as possible. So we talked about the environmental benefits. It's important to make sure you have a good irrigation system as well. So make sure that you're checking your irrigation, that it's not got leaks, it's running properly. You know, clocks are important, and clocks are important because the best time to water is between midnight and 4 a.m. on established turf, on established landscape. Now there might be some plants out there, ornamental plants, that don't like water during that time might create mold or be a problem. But overall, there's less evaporation caused by heat and daytime during those hours. There's always less wind between midnight and 4 a.m. And then the main part is you want your areas dry during the hottest part of the day, because when you have moisture at the soil level during the hottest part of the day, you're creating humidity, and that's a breeding ground for fungus. And so disease, it can be a big problem with turf areas, so you need to dry out your areas. A lot of people come home from work and, oh my gosh, it's a screaming hot day. I need to put water on my lawn because it's dying. Well, if your lawn's dying during the hottest part of the day, let it die that moment, but water it between midnight and 4 a.m. to recover it. Don't try and put water on it during the hottest part of the day. You're going to scorch it unless you just barely put, one turn of your sprinkler head on there. So kind of like us when we're out in the hot sun and perspire and the wind blows across that perspiration and it cools us off. You can do that for your lawn. It's called a syringe, but you don't want to run your irrigation at 8 a.m. getting ready for that hot day, because you're just putting fuel on the fire. You're just creating the environment for disease to occur. Not common knowledge out there, and so I really try and share that as much as possible. And then during the hottest part of the year, I always say from mid-June till about the end of August, it's best to not try and water your lawn every day. Right now, state ordinance is twice a week. Make the most of those 2 times a week and cycle soak. A lot of soils are really bound up again, and they're going to be a problem this winter when, please God, let the rain come, right? Water's going to hit all these soils that have been just dried up and have turned hydrophobic and have just bound up, and it's going to hit and it's just going to roll right off. The soil's not going to accept the water because it's so crusted over and dry. So you can prevent that from occurring by cycle soaking, and when you water twice a week, put whatever point it is to where the lawn becomes saturated or it looks like it's starting to puddle up or water's running off. Say it's 10 minutes in the hottest part of the year. Do your 10 minutes, wait a half hour to an hour, and put another 10 minutes on. What that does is it allows that first bit of water to absorb into your soil, and the second application pushes it down deeper. And with these native grasses, they have water-seeking roots that are going to go deep into your soil and chase after that water. Wind and all other conditions, heat, are going to dry out the top inch or 2 of your soil, and if your roots are right there because you've been doing 5 minutes every day. We went to this $200,000 sod installation in Petaluma. They were doing 5 minutes a day, and I thought I was going to just die. And then the guys are out there watering in the heat of the day. It was like 95. I was like, oh my gosh. Get them, make it. I couldn't even keep talking. I'm like, they need to stop watering, please. Make us stop watering. They're going to make disease, It just blew my mind. And, here it was, someone that took a really long period of time to decide to convert from tall fescue to native bentgrass. And the guy they had managing their turf didn't know better but to irrigate every night for 5 minutes. Think about it. Where do the roots sit? They're going to chill right out there. And I don't need to go anywhere. The water's all at the top of the soil. And then as soon as you get hot and windy and it dries out, it's starting to brown out and die on them. It's like so deep, infrequent irrigation. Less often for a longer period of time. If you see your areas drying out, increase your minutes, don't increase your frequency, right? So that's cycle soak, cycle soak. And then in the cool season, kick the water off, take a day out, cut back your minutes. It's all about staying interactive with your irrigation system. You can't just set it and forget it. It's somewhere up there. Don't just walk away. Don't think it's a one-time thing. A great way to work with your irrigation system is to use your water budget, which manages your irrigation in percentages. So it says, I'm going to do 50% today. It's getting hot, I'm at 100%. It's getting really hot, I have to go to 150% on my water budget. And as it cools off, go back to 100. Then go back. It's a really easy way to adjust your irrigation. My husband says it a lot better, right, Jenny? I hope I'm making sense. I'm not an irrigation specialist, but I tried. I know what I'm saying so far is good intel, so. Woogles, I put this in here for anyone who might be a designer or in the realm of water requirements and rating systems. This is a kind of a system that's been developed, has become kind of a Bible in the industry for meeting the criteria for different municipalities in order to put in landscape. Your water, you have to have areas that are very low in their water usage. So these are the different blends and how they rate and whether or not they're rated. This is available if you want. I can email it to you. Okay, picture time. So we're going to talk installations and different, kind of trying to inspire you on what you can do. So we talked about the native bent grass, the mono stand, one variety, Grassus palens, native bent. A true lawn alternative, really. I mean, you can let it go and become a meadow, but it kind of widens its blades as it gets bigger, and it raises its stem quite a lot so that the green leaf is at the tip. And if you go through and you mow it, and you mow it too short, you mow off all the green leaf, then it's just stemmy, like the center, the top picture in the center. It looks scalped. And if that happens in the summer when these grasses are just kind of chilling out, they're not growing actively, recovery can be quite a long time. So, do you have a question, kind of? No. Okay. This is the native bent grass, yes. So, there's different levels you can maintain it at. The key is to find the height you want and keep it there. You can't let it get fully mature and then come out on a summer day and cut it all the way back. It'll take forever to recover. If you do it in the spring, what I call a well-timed mowing, then your recovery can be quite fast. It just depends on the season. This is all native bent grass as well. The left-hand side is over in Carmel Valley. It's kind of an amphitheater, and they go through with a weed eater once a month, and it's a very skilled crew. They're not going out and just like, dipping down into the plant. They're staying very level with their weed eater, keeping it at the same height, being careful not to, cut off all the green leaf. But basically have it trained to where they want to see it be, and aren't really bent on it looking perfect all the time. These grasses are going to have areas that are brown and not be pristine. That's part of that new pair of glasses that we're putting on with native grasses. Lower right side is a big parking area at a shopping center that they have events on. So infrequent traffic, it'll withstand that. Once a month. That way, any areas that go out can recover. The top one is Big Break Park in Oakley. The area in the top right corner is the bent grass. In the foreground is the native mow-free, fully seeded out, senescing off, browning off. Underneath, it's green and happy, but that's how those seed heads can present themselves and really give you that seasonality I talked about. Okay, the left-hand side is over in San Mateo County, I want to say. Again, just a nice meadow. The lower right is Portola Valley. That's the Holland Yates residence. They invite people, come see it anytime you want. It's beautiful. Leeds Platinum House, everything green, as far as building and environmentally. Wonderful, wonderful people. That's a big play meadow in the base. Watered half of it with gray water and the other half with city water. Gray water, greener, looks better all the time. It's pretty cool. The top is the mow-free, again, seeding out and green. That's how it looks when the seed heads are green. That's on Apache in off of North Ridge, I want to say.
How tall is that?
The bent grass is kept at about 4 inches, but the mow-free, when the seed heads are up and going, they get about 2 to 2.5 feet tall. The green plant itself gets about 21 inches, or 14 to 21, and it falls over on itself, but it stays more low. Couple more pictures of native bent grass installations. I talked about mow-free and how the fine fescues are real shade tolerant. They're a little more forgiving of infrequent mowing. So what I'm showing here on the lower left side, that's up at Truckee Community Center, where they lay the sod and then they just do 2 passes with the lawnmower and create a garden pathway for people to walk across all day long, and then little breakouts for their benches and picnic areas. It loves the shade. They came in and added some wildflowers to it. They actually hydroseeded them over the top right after they laid the sod, and then it snowed. And so all the flowers came up in the spring. It was a really cool application. But they kept it simple. They didn't put a lot of flowers in there. If you go heavy with the wildflowers, just remember they're gonna die out. And when they do, you're gonna have all that woody, stemmy ickiness in there that you're gonna have to clean out somehow. So, they're great, but keep them simple. Keep them wispy, maybe yarrow, poppy, lupin. Don't try and throw everything but the kitchen sink in there with it. Top left-hand side is the Riverside Corona RCD. They have a wonderful lawn alternative area. They have Achillea, which is yarrow. They have some caryxes and different offerings. They're showing how you can mow or not mow the mow-free. So the foreground on the top left-hand side is mowed, no mow, and then it's left natural behind it. The gentleman on the right-hand side here, his daughters play soccer and softball. And so he wanted an area that they could play and invite their team over for a practice. And then the hillside goes down to a seasonal creek, and he didn't put irrigation in that area. So it goes dormant in the summertime. So it goes brown around the edges. And he's got, if you can see, almost like a little rough around the edge of the mowed area so that the ball doesn't roll down the hill when they're playing. It's a really cool application or installation. This is Ken Coverdale. We had his quote up there. That's his house on the right. Actually, that's his office. And he said every week he dreaded when the landscapers would come and he couldn't have a conversation because it'd be blowing outside his window. So obviously they're not using their lawn area. He actually goes out in March. I talked about well-timed mowing, and he refreshes this about every 3 years. And so he says he'd take a mower, they walk about 5 steps and have to empty the clippings. and then what happens, because these grasses are falling over on themselves, is underneath they're gonna shade themselves out. So it looks very much like Swiss cheese. But if you time it right, in the spring, we get that kind of warm spell. The Berkeley house I showed you, that was beautiful with the red clay pot, her landscaper went through and mowed it, and she called it a panic. And it was in February, and it had dried out, and it rained, and then it warmed up, and then it rained again, and that came back in like 4 weeks. It was starting to grow back, everything looked great. Ken does the same thing, where he'll time it, and when the grass is most actively growing in the spring. And then that's Alameda College on the left, so it's showing that the seed heads are up and they're senescing. I talk here about the natural cycle of a plant. It's not cut, is for it to produce a seed head. And that occurs in the spring with most of the grasses. And that's when you can go through and weed eat them or just enjoy them.
Which kind is that? That's on the right there?
They're both mow-free. Mm-hmm. They're both mow-free. This is showing the shade tolerance of the mow-free. Turf-top tall fescue, conventional tall fescue doesn't like a lot of shade. So really heavy shade areas. Some areas aren't meant to support turf. They're just too dark. So you have an option. You can go in and overseed in the spring and in the fall, kind of like a park or a golf course with a shady tee or a picnic area. They want shade, but it just doesn't have enough sunlight. Overseed. Don't leave those areas open because that's just an invitation for weeds to encroach and get a foothold. This is environmental. I like to tell a story about the resort at Squaw Creek up in the Sierra Nevada, where when they put in the golf course there, just after the Olympics were held, there was just an uproar by the Sierra Club, and you can't put a golf course in here. It's going to destroy the environment, and Squaw Creek, was going to be killed, and it was just going to be horrible. So the compromise was that they put in a series of wells along the creek to test the water. So they tested the water as it came through the forest floor and into the creek, and then they put in the golf course, and they didn't allow them to use any fertilizers or synthetic products or pesticides. but the water that came across that turf into the creek was actually cleaner than what came through the forest floor. So it just kind of really shows just what a benefit grasses are as far as cleaning and recharging our water and so forth. So that's kind of what that hillside is showing. One of our owners had gone to Holland, I want to say, and the dikes that they had there are often grassed and it's for erosion control and so forth. So they came back and did an acre along one of our levees. That was actually established with a water truck, watered maybe 3 times with limited rainfall. Stormwater channels, this is at Val Vista Park in Dublin. Just showing a stormwater channel. The grasses also can slow down the flow of the water and prevent erosion. So a lot of benefits environmentally. Bioswales are popping up everywhere. These are pictures of a parking lot at a Walmart and just showing, what a benefit they'll do for all the oils and, garbage that flows off of those parking lots and back into our waterways. A lot better than all the bark that I saw that's going to end up in our storm channel or storm drains, I got like 3 more slides. How many of y'all go all Caddyshack all the time with those little mangy varmints? Yeah. So you're going to spend money doing your landscape. Do it right. Plan ahead and definitely do your best to prevent these little critters from doing you in, because they don't like anything more than a nice root base of grass. So they'll take you out. And thank you for having me, guys. I appreciate it. All right, questions. You had